Thank you everyone, and a very good evening to everyone present here. I do understand it's possibly one of the last sessions for the day, and I think our intention would be to make this interesting and give you some takeaways on this particular very, very important topic about sustainability. As we all know, it is a boardroom agenda these days, whether we talk about supply chain or we talk about any other function. And companies across sectors, across industries are right now talking about ESG, sustainability, net zero. You would hear a lot of these terms interchangeably. So that's what we're going to be talking about with the very eminent set of panel members alongside with me today. My name is, of course, Saurabh Jain. I'm a partner at PwC. So as I said, the objective of the discussion really would be, I would request my panel members to talk about a lot of experiences, examples, insights from their own respective areas of work, their own organizations, their sectors and industries, so that there are some of those key takeaways we can all take back when we leave this hall and the forum today. So thank you once again, everyone. And before I really start, just a few more additional pointers for the discussion today. See, we all know about the Paris Agreement. A lot of commitments countries and companies have been making about their journey towards net zero. And it's not just about one function or just reducing carbon emissions. I mean, of course, that definitely is one of the major components, but there's a lot much more to it. And it's not about, again, logistics alone. There is manufacturing, there is procurement, there are supplier ecosystems on both sides, whether it's on the upstream side of supply chain or downstream part of your supply chain. So it's really a commitment that organizations are making, whether it's about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 commitments and the requirements which are there, that how do we really minimize the climate change? And from a climate change perspective, I don't have to really say it so much, but we all are experiencing that as individuals, as families, as companies, as a community and as a country, of course. So the climate change is happening right in front of us. And therefore, this whole aspect of sustainability and how do we mitigate whatever we can in the next few years is so very critical. And as I said earlier, it's not about what I can just do myself. As an organization, it's not about what I produce as emissions and I reduce and I optimize my operations to minimize that. But it's also about my ecosystem. And as I said, ecosystem is a very, very large terminology, and it can include so many more partners, vendors, providers, etc. So it's really a lot about that. So I always believe that, of course, charity begins at home, and therefore, a lot of my fellow panel members, I would request them to talk about some of their own experiences in their own organizations as much, but also go beyond. So without much ado, let me start with Ram first. Ram is sitting right next to me. So I'll possibly, Ram, start with you. Ram, of course, Hero MotoCorp, we all know about the organization. And automotive sector per se is obviously one key aspect, of the logistics sector, whether we look at, from a movement standpoint or even, let's say, two-wheelers, and the vehicles that a company like Hero MotoCorp produces. So Ram, as an organization, I'm sure you must also be under tremendous focus and pressure that, what is it that you are going to do about this whole sustainability agenda? So my question to you really is, any specific issues and challenges you'd like to talk about? And second, of course, any tenets you've identified for your own organization to really move forward on this journey?
No, thank you. It's great to be here today, by the way, talking about such an important topic. Sustainability is today table stakes. In my view, it's a hygiene factor for most organizations, and we are no different at Hero MotoCorp. The word you used earlier, by the way, you mentioned the word pressure. I don't view that as pressure. I genuinely believe it's an opportunity for us and all of our partners who work with us to be able to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the market, the rest of the world when it comes to this specific topic. It's a critical topic. Our customers, our consumers view sustainability as a very large reason to pick a product or a service today in the market. And we believe that by leading that agenda, we can choose to differentiate ourselves, as I said, from the competition. Now, I'll answer your question at three fronts relatively quickly. The first is on the product side. we are working really closely with our designers, with our R&D to build products which are far more environmentally friendly. India today, if, many of you know this, has some of the best and tightest, I would say, norms when it comes to emissions. We at Hero, we want to move that needle even further. We want to not just comply with these norms, but our products, we believe, should be far more friendly with the environment, and that allows not just us within Hero, but the 100 million consumers out there who are using Hero products to be contributing positively on this specific agenda in the environment. The second area is the manufacturing facilities that we have. We're very proud of the fact that our manufacturing facilities, we have net zero emission targets that we've set and are achieving in each one of our facilities. We have waste treatment plants. We have zero water wasted in any of our plants. It's all recycled. And we're very proud of many of our facilities, one of which is in Neemrana, which is called the Garden Factory, by the way. We actually have a garden inside our factory, right? Now, that's the second part of it. Lastly, our supplier ecosystem. Not just us. As I mentioned, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of partners that we work with. And all of them, I'm proud to say, buy into the same cultural agenda that we have around sustainability. And we are very clear that we want to engage with partners who take sustainability at the core of who they are. And so you will see that all of our partners who we work with have clear targets, clear metrics, and clear outcomes that they're achieving on this specific topic. So this is, by the way, very core for Dr. Munjal, who's our chairman and CEO. This is very core for him. And I'm really happy to say that, as part of this panel, I'm happy to say that sustainability is at the core of what Hero does and will continue to be at the core of what we do.
No, wonderful. I think it's very heartening to hear that, Ram. And of course, no pressure. It was all about the expectations that government has, regulators has, and I would say consumers have these days. And really building on that, I'll come to Umesh now. Umesh, Coca-Cola, right? I mean, we're all familiar, and Umesh represents Coca-Cola today. And I want to pick on this aspect of consumers there, Umesh. Because, when we talk about all of these issues and challenges, what are you doing about ESG, sustainability as an agenda? I think there's a whole lot of expectations consumers have these days. And when I say consumers, it's possibly all of us sitting in this room as well, wherein, more and more awareness is seeping in. We all are facing those climate and other issues. And I would, as a consumer, and I'm sure many of us would prefer a product which is really doing something about sustainability, even though I might be paying a bit extra at times. So really from Coke's perspective, what kind of initiatives, issues and challenges are you trying to solve?
It's a long answer. I'll try and shorten it a little bit. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My God. Okay. So I'll not add more on the manufacturing side, which my friend has already done. Beyond manufacturing, I think there is still a large part of sustainability which we can do on the roads as well. So despite of all the recycling we do in manufacturing, we do biodiesel usage in the DG sets, we do energy management systems in terms of technology and digitization for manufacturing. What we do for logistics is, we are surprised this year with the increasing facilities and infrastructure on CNG to start with. So there are about 7 cities where you can now easily migrate almost 100% on customer deliveries to CNG, to our surprise, which was only about 2 cities last year. So we have a good plan of about plus 500 vehicles by going live this year and close to 700, 750 going live in the next season by Q2 on CNG specifically, which reduces huge in terms of carbon emission. And our friends were just discussing before this that there is almost a 50% reduction in terms of emissions once you migrate from a diesel to a CNG. So that's number one. Telangana, we have tried biodiesel with one vendor, and it worked very well for us, both in terms of age of the vehicle, in terms of efficiencies on cost, also in terms of efficiencies on carbon emission. Works brilliantly well, but the problem is compliance. How do you exactly have labs which will test the quality of the diesel which you buy? So Telangana, a large part of Telangana today is serviced, every bottle which you get is serviced through trucks which use biodiesel. A very large part of it, significant plus upwards of 60-70%. So that's biodiesel. EVs, we have a plan. I'm sure if the automobile sector would have done great during COVID, EVs would have been on the roads right now. There are delays, but then there are decent plans on EVs which companies have. I'm still not saying that the 9-tonner or upwards of vehicle will be EV very soon, probably even next year season. That will still probably take time. But we are working with a vendor who has migrated an existing trailer into an EV. Tata is using them in Jamshedpur for about more than a year. And they have about 100 trucks there, which we are trying to experiment with them very, very soon. So that's on the roads. On truck turnaround time, there is a huge impetus in terms of how do we digitize through AI, through a lot more technology into it, through GPS, etc., where we can optimize the empty miles and the dead miles. How we can reduce waiting time at the yard. So we use IoT in the yard management system, which reduces the turnaround time of the trucks while waiting. And lastly, but not the least, I think we are on a strategy where we believe that we got to get more closer to the consumer. And we are trying a strategy which is named single touch logistics. So our key metric for overall transportation is how many kilometers do we run for a market to serve that market. End to end all put together, raw material, packing material, sourcing, primary distribution, secondary distribution. Finally, these are the kilometers the bottle traveled. And that's what we are in the quest of actually reducing over year. And there is a long range plan for 3 years where we have a target that we will come down and our single touch logistics will be very, very high. And these are surprising numbers, obviously, because we also have a network where we produce almost in every state. So that helps that way. So that's broadly our kind of strategy and pillars which we are using on sustainability right now. I'll try and share whatever is official. So it's almost official right now that we are about 50% plus green in terms of energy what we use to produce Coke. It's almost more than 50% green and renewable. We use a lot of solar, we use a lot of wind from the grid, we use a lot of power purchase agreements with the government and try and make sure that we go as green as possible. That was my short answer. Thanks.
No, thank you, Umesh. Again, I would say wonderful insights. See, going, having those CNG or, those kind of trucks in 7 cities across the country and doing possibly 100% secondary movement through that, right? Umesh?
100% secondary and also biodiesel, to our surprise when we tried replicating, there are 27 suppliers in India who can provide biodiesel in different states. So you can still replicate.
No, these are interesting inputs, I would say, and maybe a set of takeaways for some of you here that, as you go back to your, routine work next week onwards, you could actually look at some of these initiatives very, very closely. So thanks, Umesh, for that. So I'll just maybe quickly move to Naveen now. And Naveen, maybe more from procurement perspective, a lot of data points that one could refer to on sustainability. You will see that a bulk of the emissions, which are indirect in nature, are produced upstream. And upstream would typically means, working back with your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier N kind of suppliers. And a lot of those, of course, you don't have a direct access control at times and visibility on top of that. So, Umesh, really from a procurement standpoint, I'm sure, again, this whole agenda is an important one. And maybe, Naveen, you could answer that, from a steel sector standpoint, where, again, we talk about now green steel, which is like, again, a lot of inputs are green, and therefore you call it that. So what kind of initiatives, actions, Naveen, you are looking at, at JSPL?
Hello, hi friends, good evening. So, steel sector is basically, comes into hard to abate, carbon emissions. So just to update you on the numbers, we emit 2,500 kgs of CO2 to manufacture 1 ton of steel. So this is our number. Now, what is the goal? In Europe, this number is around 1.2 kg per ton of liquid steel. And what we are aiming is around 1.7 kg ton per ton of liquid steel. So this is the target. And I think the entire steel fraternity is actually aiming. We are searching, exploring, evaluating a lot of ways how we can do it. And I'm pleased to tell you that right now we are the only steel manufacturer in world, not in India, in world, which is using coal gasification based sponge iron making or DRI making, which we normally call. We are the only steel producer in world. So what we have done in this? So we have done 2-3 things here. Number one, first we used our Swadesi coal to make synthesis gas. Then we reduced this consumption from 2.5 to 1.2 by using this synthesis gas. So with this, it is a clean fuel. There is no emissions. And this is point number one. Point number two is about the carbon capture. We do 2,000 tons of CO2 capture every day through this process. 2,000 tons. So we capture CO2, but unfortunately we have to emit into the atmosphere. So now we are evaluating the option how we can utilize this CO2, because this is a concentrated CO2. And my friend from Coca-Cola, they are going to be our potential customers. We are, as we speak, we are trying to develop the industrial clusters, where companies like beverage industry or medical industry or, in the casting industry, they can come and they can, over the fence, we can give them CO2. So I think this is where we are striving though, and we are one of the first steel manufacturer where we are very, very specific about it, very, very serious about it. Because I'll tell you, it is not about taking it seriously, but it is about going forward. How, if we are aiming for restricting the temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade, these are the must. How we'll do it? In transportation sector, if we'll speak, 250 million ton of CO2 it is getting emitted. 250 million ton. We have to reduce it. And there are small ways how you can reduce it. First is migrating from the fuel-based economy, which I think we all see how the percentage of renewable energy, the percentage of renewable and the share of percentage renewable in 2010, it was merely 3.5 to 4%. And today we are standing at 12% of the overall energy basket. So that means that we have shifted or we have migrated from 75 gigawatt to right now it is 150 gigawatt, my friends, wind and solar. And India is probably the only country in the world where the transition is so fast, right? And leaving 70 gigawatt for hydro. So I think, and this number we have to take it to right now from 200 gigawatt to 500 gigawatt by 2030, right? And the target of the government of India is we have to cut the overall energy basket, we have to reduce it to 50%, we have to use it by renewable, and 2070 is the net zero. So I think, friends, we all have to collaborate. We have to work as a family here. It is not that only one person or one industry can do it. It is a sequence of steps which we all have to take. Small steps at a time. This is on the manufacturing side of it. On the procurement side of it, it is again, it is like the entire supplier partners. We work close to 10,000 all supplier partners. We had a town hall with them. Small steps like recycling. We use close to 1.5 to 2% of the refractories. So we asked them to recycle it and they have started it. And then opening up the warehouses exactly on the same model as Toyota production system near to our factory so that we can reduce the distance, we can reduce the emission. So these are the small things which we have started with. But then the good thing is that everyone, all our supplier partners, they are educated about this ESG. They are educated and they are motivated that they have to do it. So I think this is a good starting point, and I think it's a long journey. We cannot do it in 1 year or 2 years. It is going to take time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. And I surely appreciate what you said. There are small steps that have to be undertaken, whether on the manufacturing, logistics, procurement, all kind of functions in the value chain one has to. And second, of course, I think is collaboration, which also is extremely critical given that many of your suppliers or vendor partners, they could be very, very small players and they may not have enough, let's say, bandwidth, understanding, knowledge to really drive some of these agenda that, and you are also responsible for a lot of those inputs because they are coming into you as a principal organization. So yeah, absolutely agree, Naveen, and thanks for the inputs. Let me turn to Atul now. Atul represents Indian Oil, a large public sector behemoth. And I've spoken with Atul many times before, always hear a lot of inspiring stories from the public sector perspective. So Atul, really on this whole sustainability agenda, I'm sure Indian Oil would again be doing some, I would say, marquee initiatives and trying to solve this whole, I would say, aspect of climate change to the extent you can contribute. So happy to kind of hear some thoughts on issues and challenges, initiatives, any pillars that you've identified for trying to address this agenda of sustainability.
Thank you. First of all, let me say good evening to all of you. First, let me just explain the scale of operations, what we do. 10 refineries, processing of about 80 million tons of crude per annum, the marketing for about 75 million tons of finished products. Finished products would include your petrol, diesel, LPG, as well as furnace oil and coke. So no molecule of the crude oil which we process goes waste. It has to be marketed. It cannot be disposed of in any other way. So that's what we do. Now this 80 million tons of crude which is sourced, about 85% of which is imported, is sourced at the ports, transported through pipelines. When we use the word pipelines, that means we are cutting down on the carbon emissions. This would have gone either by rail, would be one option. Second is the pipeline, which is the most climatic, I will say, user-friendly option today. After processing of this crude at these 10 refineries, it has to be taken, transported to about 160 distribution points for petrol, diesel, as well as for LPG. Transported through maybe about a fleet of about 60,000 trucks to the distribution agents, 34,000 retail outlets, about 30,000 LPG distributors. So the amount of 65,000 trucks managing, moving on petrol, on diesel, on CNG, on any other fuel, reaching out to the customer. So this is what we manage. Now, there is immense potential for us to control the emissions on this. Scope 1, which is happening at our refineries. So when we talk of refinery and refining process, as on date, we are processing or releasing about 2 million tons equivalent of carbon dioxide in the environment. Now, how to control that? Number one, we are now working on carbon capture, utilization, and storage schemes, wherein we are going to capture this carbon dioxide. One, we may use it, transport it to the wells of, or the depleted wells of ONGC or Oil India Limited, deposit it over there, maybe deposit in the sea sequestration, or else the third portion is, as my colleague said, we develop industrial clusters in and around the refineries where carbon dioxide is being produced for consumption of that. So that is an active consideration, and for which Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and other such beverages company, as well as textile companies, they are becoming our partners to use that carbon dioxide. That is going to save a lot on that. Second is, nearly each of our refineries has got a biodiversity park wherein we are trying to minimize or absorb some carbon dioxide over there. Third is migrating or giving the user a choice of or replacing the conventional fuels to biodiesel fuels or biofuels, ethanol or biodiesel. Now, ethanol is one fuel which is consuming or taking away the waste material biomass. Today, most of us in Delhi, in the winter season, we are getting plagued with this pollution because of the burning of parali. That parali, now what we are talking of, taking it to our industries, processing it as a biomass, converting that into ethanol, and bringing it back into the system as a fuel. So it is having a double effect. One, the pollution is getting reduced, and the resultant fuel is pollution-free. So these are the baby steps, as my colleague has said, baby steps what we are taking. We are again venturing into this battery technology, for which we are going to provide support. We have already entered into agreements. So Indian Oil, as on date, is moving away from its existing role of petroleum industry to an energy industry. As the things stand, because petroleum is not going to be the future. Energy is going to be there. We cannot continue on this. This will continue, but as the things, the stats show, till 2035, the growth of petroleum sector is going to continue. We have to continue meeting the demand even beyond 2035. The growth rate is going to come down from the existing 7% to maybe 3%. At 2035, it may stabilize, and we may see an inflection point at that point when the demand will reduce. We now have to see as to how to capture the carbon from the environment, this fossil fuels, how do we, the carbon dioxide which is being emitted with this increased consumption of petroleum fuels, till that time, how do we reduce it? And for that purpose, Indian Oil, or for that matter, the entire petroleum industry, is working towards that to minimize the impact of the carbon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Atul. And certainly it's always very inspiring to hear, public sector companies really leading their way through some of these initiatives. And very heartening to hear that Indian Oil becoming a more energy-focused company than just a typical petroleum company that we all know of or think about. So yeah, number of initiatives, really appreciate some of the thoughts you've shared. So Ram, coming back to you. Friends, some of the data points I'd like to just quickly mention, if you also maybe research. Now there is data that supports the fact that companies which have taken some concrete sustainability measures, they enjoy higher valuations. They enjoy much better cost parameters as well. So my question to Ram, to you is that, like you mentioned, yes, you're focused on these initiatives and number of things you're doing. So is that driven by some of these financial outcomes, or is it just really as a responsible citizen, responsible corporate, you are driving towards these number of initiatives, and also your thoughts on next 2 to 3 year journey that you've set out for yourself?
See, I think, okay, so the answer to your question, by the way, is it started probably from a place of, at Hero, the journey towards sustainability started from a place of being a responsible corporate citizen, doing the right thing by the environment and from a noble goal for sure. But I think somewhere along the way, of course, it became very clear to us as to the rest of the market that it is also financially responsible to do it that way, because consumers prefer brands, as we said earlier in the conversation, which are taking sustainability seriously, are building their products with that goal in mind. So I would say that it's difficult to divorce the two these days, right? It's clearly an advantage that I think most companies that take this seriously are enjoying, and we are happy to be one of them, right? Who see that as an added advantage. But I do believe, and coming back to the first goal that we started with, I do think that to raise the bar, we have to constantly think beyond the financial advantage that's coming through to us today. We have to view this as something that's larger than that, because without that, we'll never be able to push the envelope continuously, which is what's required to be able to achieve some of the larger goals that we need to achieve in this space.
And also, next couple of years agenda, if that's been thought of.
See, I think there are some large numbers that we've put out there in terms of becoming, carbon neutral in many of our factories by 2030, which, by the way, is a very, very difficult goal if you think about the production process for a vehicle, right? But I don't want to talk about numbers. I would say in the next couple of years, I'd be happy to see the spirit, the culture that we've cultivated, I would say, at Hero. I would love to see that imbibed and sort of taken in. In fact, I would like to infect the rest of the partner community, the other peers that we have in the industry with the same enthusiasm that we have for sustainability. That would be a goal we've taken on, I would love to be able to see achieved.
Excellent. I think that's really superb if that could actually be accomplished. And see, a lot of these initiatives, will have a larger ecosystem effect. As you work with a few, there's a larger ecosystem, expectation as well, which builds out. So maybe I'll move to Umesh now on that piece. Umesh, again, when we talk about this whole, like you spoke about logistics service providers that you work with, truckers you work with, and the expectation. So what is the role you are playing in terms of really helping them out achieve those objectives? Because ultimately, you as the principal organization is trying to achieve something. How do you incentivize them? How do you educate them? Are there any learnings, good practices that the folks out here can actually get from you?
So I think, see, there's a lot of training, of course, on capability building, etc. which happens. But largely, this logistics cost reduction from a 13% GDP to the target of 8%, which we have for the country, will come from one biggest lever, which we call as TAT, the truck turnaround time. And how do we optimize that, which obviously has a lot of benefits from a carbon emission standpoint as well. And how do we ensure that the trucker is able to utilize the asset properly? How do we ensure that technology plays a role in backhaul integration? How do we also partner with companies? Like, for example, we did one backhauling integration with Asian Paints, where Coke goes from point A to B and Asian Paints from point B to A, and you keep on rotating the truck instead of, dead miles or inefficient miles. So all that kind of stuff is what we're right now doing. The other important part is also education from a technology standpoint or from an alternative fuel standpoint. How do we go to biodiesel? Biodiesel is a big change management, right? The driver would not want to get into something like biodiesel because of many obvious reasons. CNG is another difficult change management where you need to migrate your customers. So all of that, I think, is more a part of capability building and vendor development, which we'll have to continue doing. And I think I would urge everyone to try and see how we can make that more often. There are also sometimes we'll have to bend rules. For example, companies might not be okay for having a longer commitment on customized transportation solutions. So we finally realized this, and we have gone to the system where we are now committing 5 years on any asset which we buy. We are okay to commit for 5 years because that's the cost of doing business, and that helps you a lot of other benefits, including carbon emission, net zero, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a combination of how you bend rules, and it's also a combination of how you make your vendors more partners, more capable to work with you more closely.
No, absolutely, and I think that's very, very important, because unless you really create that capability, more holistically, just getting otherwise doing all in isolation. So coming to Naveen, to you, from a procurement standpoint specifically, see the typical measures in procurement, would include cost, quality, delivery, those kind of parameters. My question to you is that, is there a larger change happening where the whole evaluation of vendors and partners is also including, new parameters like sustainability, carbon pricing? Are those elements being built out? What kind of initiatives you kind of looking at on that front?
Yeah, when we do the overall scorecard approach, definitely, frankly speaking, right now, the sustainable part is like less than 2% in the overall weightage. But then as we go forward, because there is also a pushback, to us as well in terms of our customers, our steel customer. Now, when we do the export of steel, our customers in America or in Japan, in Europe, they have a percentage of 10 to 15% on the sustainability. And the good thing is that they are willing to give us a premium of 5%, which is close to $50 to $60 a ton, right? So then it became imperative on our side in terms of improving our internal system, our manufacturing. So far as our procurement is concerned, definitely we are migrating, as I told earlier as well. We are having a town hall meeting with our supplier partner. We see how maximum we can do the recycling of our products like steel, or on the refractory side, or on the electrode side, on the ferroalloy side, where whatever emission is happening, whatever waste is happening, that we can recycle. Because every waste is also, you have a lot of alumina, silica, chrome, which are actually hazardous in nature, right? So that is where, the maximum emphasis is, and it is going to take time on the logistics side. We have started doing a lot of initiative in terms of retrofitting our couple of our trucks to LNG, and it worked really well, though the initial cost is close to 35% higher than the normal diesel truck, but then the payback is close to 2 years. Then when you talk about the EV side, the cost is close to, it is almost double on the EV trucks. But then when we talk about the payback period, it is really mind-boggling. We are actually quite surprised to hear that number. The payback is less than 1.5 years, which is actually a clean go-go. So as we speak, we have ordered close to 50 to 60 trucks. In China, we are going to use those trucks in our toughest of the area, that is in our mines. iron ore mines and coal mines. And they are the toughest terrain, where we can test the robustness of these trucks. And where we can clearly see that if they can work there, then I think in the normal, city area, urban area, rural area, they can easily work. So I think the better infrastructure has to be there. And the government is giving a lot of emphasis on this. I can tell you, government, they are not interested to give subsidy right now. Everything they want to link with performance in PLI schemes, right? So it is up to us. The onus is on us to actually encash that in terms of really seize that opportunity, and we have to take it forward. So that is what I have to say on this.
Yeah, thank you. And do understand, onus is on us, I think goes without saying. And thanks for the inputs, Naveen. Atul, question to you really. And this is again possibly, I always believe that, when you want to look at and benchmark processes, a lot of best practices one could actually pick up from the public sector as well, because you deal with a lot of complicated scenarios. So on sustainability, I wanted to just pick your quick thoughts on any process and technology interventions that one could look at, and which could again be takeaways for the audience here, that it's not just a one-off piece that you're doing. You give a project to two people, they do something, and they come back and report. But how do you embed accountability via process and technology interventions? Any thoughts?
Very complicated and difficult question what we have asked. But yes, this particular issue, we have taken it through the automation of our entire processes. All our refineries, they are totally modeled through a software, integrated software, wherein while we are trying to identify which crude to process where, one of the parameters which goes into that is how much carbon dioxide or how much sulfur we are going to produce out of that crude. Then only we weigh the cost which is going into the environment to process that crude vis-a-vis the cost, the price what we are going to get out of it. It is not purely profit or not purely the margin what I am going to get on that crude, but also the environment I am also identifying as part with that software itself. So that software is one which helps me out as to how to control the emissions. Control the emissions in terms of sulfur, control the emissions in terms of carbon dioxide, control the emissions, not only the emissions, control the catalyst usage. One of the major factors what Mr. Ahlawat said, how to dispose of the raw materials, the catalyst, and in our process, most of the equipments what we are using, they are all catalyst based. And these catalysts would have a short life and they cannot be used. So there has to be a complete process for disposal of that or regeneration of that. So we have identified those processes, requirements, partnered with the processors so that it's going out in a safe way. And the damage to the environment is minimized. That's what our take is. That's what we are trying to do.
No, thank you. And you did answer that difficult question. So, just a couple of thoughts maybe, from my side, and maybe then we can possibly take a few questions from the audience as well. So I think clearly, if I have to look at the discussion today, you've heard a lot of great inputs from each one of the panel members. There are specific initiatives one could take, but broadly speaking, I would say three takeaways. One is that, yes, there are set of practices and processes one could look at around sustainability, because it's a journey. And it's not just, we're starting now and we're finishing tomorrow, but it's really over the next many years, this will continue and it's an important agenda. Second is, I think, data. And as Mr. Atul also said that, how do you measure? Use softwares to measure, some data points, the movement of trucks, optimization, and use as much, possibility of technology or tools to capture and process data, and of course, take initiatives basis that. And I think third, which is very, very important, is the whole performance management and incentive part, because you are not alone in this journey. You have a lot of ecosystem involved in this. How do you incentivize them, incentivize your own people, internally, externally, both, and the whole measure the performance around these kind of targets that the organization has set out to. So I think these are possibly the three key takeaways, at least in my view, and so thank you very much. Really, appreciate your time. Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for answering that question.